از نیکسون پرزیدنشال لایبرری اند میوزیم با شما صحبت میکنم در یوربا لیندا در جنوب کالیفرنیا. امشب یک اتفاق بسیار تاریخی خواهد افتاد و از طرف Presidential Nixon Library and Museum به Crown Prince رضا پهلوی، شاهزاده رضا پهلوی، جایزه Architect of Peace اهدا خواهد شد. جمعی از سخنرانان امشب اینجا هستند و شاهزاده رضا پهلوی تا دقایق دیگر سخنرانی خواهند کرد و بعد جایزه رو به دست ایشون خواهند سپرد. با ما باشید برای گزارش جامع. همونطور که می‌بینید این یک ریسپشن بسیار جالبی هست و تاریخی و همه لحظه شماری میکنن که ببینند که این جایزه رو شاهزاده رضا پهلوی از آن خودشون خواهند کرد. این جایزه میدونید که به تعداد بسیار معدودی تا به حال اهدا شده، از پرزیدنت های سابق گرفته مثل پرزیدنت جورج هربرت واکر بوش و آقای جورج دبلیو بوش و چند تن از پرزیدنت های دیگر. با ما باشید برای یک گزارش بسیار جالب همین امشب از Nixon Presidential Library and Museum. Stay tuned.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you. I haven't even said anything yet, so I already like this crowd. My name is Jim Byron, and I have the honor of serving as the president and CEO of the Richard Nixon Foundation, and I want to welcome you all to the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege and a high honor to welcome to the Nixon Library His Imperial Highness Reza Pahlavi, Crown Prince of Iran, and Her Highness Princess Yasmin. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to stay standing as we begin this evening with the singing of A Iran by the California Zoroastrian Center, DAF. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please stay standing for the singing of the Star-Spangled Banner by Ali Solorio.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. Your Highnesses, thank you for joining us this evening. This is an evening dedicated to learning lessons and sometimes painful lessons from the past in order to inform and influence a brighter, better, and more peaceful future. The Richard Nixon Foundation's mission is to preserve the legacy of President Nixon and see that his legacy is advanced now and into the future. That's a legacy of leadership, of geopolitical grand strategy, of public service, and of working for a more just society at home. For his epitaph, President Nixon chose a line from his first inaugural address. The greatest honor history can bestow is the title of peacemaker. In 1995, the year after his death, the Richard Nixon Foundation created the Architect of Peace Award to be bestowed on the rare and consequential individual who embodies President Nixon's noble goal and advances his legacy. We have decided to honor two individuals who are more than symbols of what was. They are representatives today of a strong but oppressed people, a noble but burdened citizenry who are crying out for better leadership and crying out for peace. They are symbols of what can be. Her Imperial Majesty, Empress Farah Pahlavi, and His Imperial Highness, the Crown Prince, are jointly receiving this award. We will convey the award to the Shah Banu at an intimate luncheon on November 7th in Washington, D.C., and you are all invited to join us, which I hope all of you do. But this evening, we honor a man for providing a voice for the Iranian people, and we honor a relationship between the Iranian people and the American people, a relationship that thrived as allies during the Nixon presidency and under the reign of Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. I want to recognize the co-chairs of this evening's event, to whom everyone at the Richard Nixon Foundation and everyone gathered this evening owes a great deal of thanks, and that's to Dr. Nikon Khatibi and Dr. Parmas Khatibi. Thank you very much for your leadership this evening. I also want to acknowledge and thank all of our generous underwriters and supporters, but in particular, Ling and Charlie Zhang. Charlie serves as treasurer of the Richard Nixon Foundation and is a close friend, so thank you both very much for your support. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy your dinners.
The Richard Nixon Foundation is proud and honored to present the Architect of Peace Award to Her Imperial Majesty Farah Pahlavi and His Imperial Highness Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. Facing adversity with courage and determination, they have each devoted more than 40 years to championing religious freedom and focusing attention on human rights abuses in Iran, and to advocating the reinstatement of a democratic form of government. The award also recognizes the long and close relationship between Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi and Richard Nixon. The Shah's long reign spanned 7 presidential administrations. But it was his special relationship and personal friendship with President Nixon that made history and changed history. They met for the first time in Tehran in December 1953. In notes he made at the time, Vice President Nixon described the Shah's quiet dignity. He was impressed by his probing, astute questions. He sensed an inner strength. They met again in Washington in 1958 and 10 years later in Tehran. In October 1969, the new president welcomed their partnership.
Your Imperial Majesty, it is a very great honor and a special honor for me to welcome you again to our nation's capital, and at the same time to welcome Her Imperial Majesty, the Empress. Our friendship goes back over a period of 20 years when we first met in Tehran when I was Vice President of the United States and when you then were a very young emperor. It is significant to note that of all of the areas in the world which pose a potential threat to peace in the world, that Iran is in a very key central area. I refer, of course, to the Mideast, to the Persian Gulf, and to all of that area that surrounds it. And what gives us a great deal of heart, those of us all over the world who are interested in peace, is that you have always stood for and stand for now a policy of contributing to the forces of peace and stability rather than to the forces of war and destruction.
In 1979, the former president traveled to Mexico to confer and console with the exiled and ailing Shah, assuring him that millions of Americans were still his friends. The friendship that was strong in triumph was strengthened in tragedy.
I saw the Shah the last time in Mexico, at Cuernavaca, Mexico. He was then in the last phases of terminal cancer, although he would never admit it or talk about his own problems at all. But he was quite thin and quite pale. But his head still as active and sharp as it had always been. He's a very intelligent, introspective man. And he said that what concerned him about the way he was treated by the United States was not that the United States was for him or against him, but was the uncertainty of the policy. He says there's nothing worse when you are confronted with revolutionary and rebel forces and uncertainty insofar as support is concerned. One day, for example, he said statements would come in, public and private, from Washington indicating total support and urging him to stand firm. The next day, there would be some story leaked from a high-level aide, printed all over the world and given particular credence in Tehran, to the effect that lower-level or second-level people in the administration were meeting with Khomeini and others who were out to knock the Shah off or out, as the case might be. And then the next day, there would be a story to the effect that in the event that the Shah left Iran or was overthrown, the United States would be prepared to accept any government that the people chose. Well, he said all of this had the effect of encouraging his enemies and, of course, discouraging his own supporters. He said that was a mistake. And I believe it was a mistake, too. As a matter of fact, what happened to the Shah, I think, could only be interpreted in that part of the world and other parts of the world as well, is that it is dangerous to be a friend of the United States. and it may pay to be an enemy. I think what we have to understand is that the Shah was the best friend of the United States in that area, in the whole Persian Gulf area, and it was Israel's only friend. The Shah, we must remember, in the 1973 war, furnished oil for our Mediterranean fleet when the other countries in the area had cut it off. And the Shah tied down the Iraqi forces by supporting the Kurds against the Iraqis so that they never got involved in the 73 war.
A year later, he made a sad and lonely pilgrimage to march alongside the Shah Banu and the Crown Prince in the Shah's funeral procession through the streets of Cairo.
When I was there, I was the only dignitary of any rank who came to the Shah's funeral, because here the Shah, who before everybody was bowing and scraping before him, the heads of state and government and so forth, because he was rich and powerful and so forth, and now they all avoided him because he was out of power. And I never forgot that as I was standing there in the big tent where all the VIPs, usually ambassadorial level, not head of state level, were standing, Sadat came walking in, resplendent in his uniform, general's uniform. He saw me, his eyes lit up, and he walked over, held both hands out, and he said, "How good of you to come. How good of you to come." And I said, "Mr. President, it was very courageous of you to receive the Shah after virtually every other country did not grant him sanctuary." And he said, "Courageous, sir? It isn't courageous to stand up for a friend."
For more than 4 decades, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has dedicated his life in exile to preserving and honoring the history and greatness of Iran. He travels the world speaking out against the abuse and oppression of the Iranian people, calling for peaceful regime change and for a new government for Iran. Reza Pahlavi has said that peace is neither a relic of history nor a distant dream. It is a promise we owe to ourselves and our children, and together we can make it a reality. The Richard Nixon Foundation presents the Architect of Peace Award to His Imperial Highness Reza Pahlavi.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Please grab your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Nikan Khatibi, and it is an extraordinary honor and a profound privilege to stand before you tonight to introduce a man whose vision, courage, and commitment resonate not only in the hearts of Iranians worldwide, but also on the global stage. His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi, Crown Prince of Iran, is more than just the son of the late Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. He embodies hope, resilience, and an unwavering advocacy for freedom and democracy. For those of us who grew up in Iranian households like mine, the Crown Prince's presence was a constant. His image adorned our walls, and his voice echoed on our television screens. As a young Iranian Americans, we viewed him as a symbol of a distant Iran, one that we held in our memories. But as I matured and had the privilege of engaging with the Crown Prince personally, it became clear that he's far more than a symbol of Iran's past. He represents the promise of Iran's future, one rooted in freedom, dignity, and democratic values. For decades living in exile, His Royal Highness has courageously taken on the role of one of the most prominent voices against the brutal regime of the Islamic Republic. While many have become entangled in debates over reformists and hardliners, the Crown Prince has seen through this false dichotomy, recognizing that both factions represent the same system of oppression. His unwavering conviction has been clear. Iran deserves not just reform, but a complete transformation. A free, secular democracy aligned with the aspirations of its people and the values shared by the free world. One more time, Iran deserves not just a reform, but a complete transformation. A free, secular democracy aligned with the aspirations of its people and the values shared by the free world. The Crown Prince has spent decades advocating for this vision, often at great personal risk. As a beacon of hope for millions of Iranians, his courage and persistence have inspired the brave women, men, and young people who today take to the streets, risking their lives in the pursuit of liberty. He has been their voice on the international stage, speaking for those who cannot, and drawing global attention to their struggles. Beyond Iran, His Royal Highness has also emerged as a leading voice for a new Middle East, one built on cooperation, mutual respect, and peace. Last year, he made history as the most prominent Iranian to visit the State of Israel, where he was warmly received by leaders across the political spectrum. His presence there was not merely symbolic, it demonstrated his commitment to bridging divides and building new alliances for a brighter future, not only for Iran, but for that entire region in the Middle East. In the Arab world, too, the Crown Prince has championed a vision for peace and prosperity, one that rejects the Islamic Republic's legacy of conflict and violence. He has reached out to leaders, communities, and nations that have long been at odds, offering a path forward that unites rather than divides, that builds bridges instead of walls. The Crown Prince's commitment is evident not only in words, but also in actions, ladies and gentlemen. In Jerusalem, he paid his respect at the Jewish holy site of the Western Wall. In Haifa, he recognized the plight of Iran's Baha'i minority by touring the Baha'i gardens. He honored the memory of Iran's persecuted Christians by visiting the Vatican, the Holy See. And most personally, he paid homage to Iran's ancient Zoroastrian faith by visiting the Zoroastrian Fire Temple in Houston. Tonight, we gather to honor a man whose tireless efforts for a free Iran and a peaceful region echo the aspirations of millions. While the Islamic Republic poses one of the greatest threats to global stability, the freedom-loving people of Iran represent some of the world's greatest potential partners. At the helm of their struggles stands a man who embodies their hopes, their dreams, and unwavering resolve. A man whose name they chant in the streets across the country almost daily. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with the utmost respect and admiration I ask you to join me in welcoming to the stage that very man, a true leader, a voice for justice, a symbol of a brighter future. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear friend and tonight's distinguished recipient, His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi.
Well, after 4 decades, I guess I have to rely on other tools than I didn't need earlier, but it's a lifetime dedication, and I'm happy to be back here at the Nixon Library. Distinguished guests, dear friends, and fellow advocates of freedom and peace. It is an honor to receive the Nixon Library's Architect of Peace Award. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to the leadership of the Nixon Library, the Nixon Foundation, and all those who continue to preserve the legacy of a great statesman, President Richard Nixon. This honor is especially meaningful not only because of President Nixon's towering contributions to global peace, but because of the deep personal connection between President Nixon and my family. Tonight, as we reflect on the legacy of peace and diplomacy, we also recognize that standing for what is right sometimes requires standing alone, something President Nixon understood better than most. When we think of President Nixon's legacy, we naturally recall his groundbreaking foreign policy, his bold decision to open relations with China, his efforts to ease tensions with the Soviet Union through détente, and his tireless work to secure peace in the aftermath of Vietnam. But President Nixon's vision extended beyond the immediate concerns of his time. He saw the Middle East as a vital region, one that held the key to stability in an increasingly interconnected world. And it was President Nixon who best understood the vital role Iran played in securing peace and security in that region. Iran, under my late father's leadership, stood as a pillar of stability in the Middle East. My father, the late Shah, worked tirelessly to build a modern, progressive Iran, a nation where economic growth, education, and development could flourish. And throughout those years, President Nixon stood as a trusted ally and a steadfast friend of Iran. He recognized, long before many others, the importance of a strong, peaceful Iran in safeguarding the Middle East. But tonight, I wish to reflect on something much more personal. For me, President Nixon's legacy is not just one of foreign policy, but one of friendship. Friendship and loyalty in the truest sense of those words. Many of you know the difficult history of my family. When my father was forced into exile, the world was quick to turn its back. Those who once relied on his leadership, vision, and even patronage found it easier to abandon him at his moment of need. Yet, amidst this desertion, one man remained. That man was President Nixon. When my father passed away in 1980, President Nixon did not hesitate to travel to Egypt for his funeral. In doing so, he joined President Anwar Sadat as one and the only two world leaders of significant global stature to attend. Despite the shifting political winds, despite the ease with which so many others had turned away, President Nixon chose to stand by his friend, and in doing so, he stood by the people of Iran. It was not a decision based on political expediency. It was a decision rooted in integrity and conviction. President Nixon knew what so many others chose to forget, that true friendship is not about convenience, not performatively, but instinctively. He knew that standing on the right side of history meant doing so even when it is not popular. Today, as I reflect on those difficult years, while I feel immense personal affection and appreciation for Presidents Sadat and Nixon, I feel no bitterness toward those other world leaders who abandoned my father and my nation. Indeed, I do not think much about them at all. For me, the greatest recognition does not come from the actions of world leaders or political figures. It comes from the people of Iran themselves. Today, in the streets of Iran, people chant the name of my father. They remember him not simply as a leader of a bygone era, but as a symbol of sovereignty, progress, pride, and service to the nation. Despite the decades that have passed, his memory is alive in the hearts of Iranians. His greatest vindication comes not from the actions of governments, but from the voices of ordinary people who honor his legacy. I spoke of President Nixon standing alone. Often those fighting for Iran's liberation did so alone, and against the pressures of the global media and establishment. Even today, those pressures continue. But today things have changed, because those ordinary people who honor my father's name do so not just out of nostalgia. Those ordinary people, millions of them across my country, are extraordinarily brave, because they are not just hoping for the better future my father believed they deserved. They are fighting for it. I was often told that I would not get far in my campaign for my country because I did not have the apparatus of state, certainly not the proper funding, and no army. But now, I have such an army, my extraordinary brave compatriots. And having once worn my nation's uniform, there's no one I stand more proudly side by side with than the people of Iran today. And I will stand with them until victory. And so, as I accept this award tonight, I do so not just for myself. This honor belongs to the people of Iran. They are the true architects of peace. For decades, they have endured unimaginable suffering under a brutal regime that has sought to extinguish their hopes and dreams. Yet, despite everything, they continue to rise. They continue to fight for the realization of our great civilization. Their sacrifices are not too often ignored on the world stage. But tonight, through this recognition, the Nixon Library is shining a light on their courage and resilience. Just as President Nixon once stood with my father, the Nixon Library now stands with the Iranian people, choosing not to follow the easy or popular path, but to stand on the side of truth and justice. For over 4 decades, the people of Iran have been engaged in a struggle for their most basic human rights. They have faced persecution, imprisonment, torture, and death, all for daring to demand what should be guaranteed to all: the right to live in peace, to express their beliefs freely, and to choose their leaders without fear. From the student movement of 1999 and the regime's deadly attack on the Tehran University students' dormitory, to the protests of 2009, where millions took to the streets in the name of freedom, to the freedom fighters of November 2019, to the brave youth of today who risk everything by defying the regime's oppressive laws, these are the true architects of peace. Their struggle is not for power or for conquest. It is for the simple yet profound right to live in dignity. Yet we stand at a dangerous juncture. The winds of war are blowing across our region. But let us be clear, this is not the war of the Iranian people. This is the war of a dictator Ali Khamenei, who thrives on division and conflict. The Iranian people do not seek war. They seek peace, security, and a future free from tyranny. They are fighting for that future. Theirs is not just a quest to free Iran, but to free the Middle East, Arabs and Israelis from the terror of the Islamic Republic. It is because of them, my dear compatriots, that I have stayed in this fight. I seek nothing for myself, only to serve them. So as long as I live, I will continue my lifelong mission to free Iran from this oppressive regime. I will do everything in my power to ensure that the future of Iran is one of peace, democracy, and justice. We are on the cusp of change, and I remain committed to doing my duty to my country and my people. I will work tirelessly to oversee and ensure that Iran undergoes a peaceful and secure transition to a secular democracy, one where every citizen can be as an equal, free from any form of discrimination. In this mission, I draw inspiration from the great leaders of my youth, my own father, President Sadat, and President Nixon. These men understood that peace is not simply the absence of war, but the presence of justice, dignity, and freedom. They were architects of a better world, and it is their legacy that I seek to carry forward. President Nixon's vision for a peaceful and secure Middle East remains as relevant today as it was during his presidency. His boldness in pursuing peace, his willingness to challenge the status quo, and his unshakable belief in freedom continues to inspire me. As I accept this award, I do so with not hope, but belief that we are nearing the day when the Iranian people will once again take their rightful place in the world, a free, democratic, and peaceful Iran. This is the future we seek. This is the future we will achieve. Thank you again for this profound honor. I accept it in memory of all those Iranians who have lost their lives in the battle to reclaim Iran. As President Nixon's epitaph says, the greatest honor history can bestow is the title of peacemaker. Tonight, you have honored the memories of my fallen compatriots.
Thank you, sir, and that was very inspiring. It's now time to present the Architect of Peace Award, and I'd like to invite Your Highness, Princess Yasmin, to join us on stage, as well as a few special friends, Pármus and Nikon, and Ling and Charlie Jiang, if you would join us as well. And I'm now going to read the award citation. The Architect of Peace Award was established in 1995, shortly after President Nixon's death, to honor individuals who embody his lifelong goal of shaping a more peaceful world. Its recipients include Presidents Gerald Ford, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush, former Secretaries of State Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, and Mike Pompeo, Senators Elizabeth Dole, Joe Lieberman, and John McCain, Ambassadors Walter and Leonore Annenberg, and Robert O'Brien, and we now add another distinguished name to that impressive roster. Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has devoted more than 40 years to championing religious freedom in Iran, advocating for a democratic form of government backed by popular vote, and bringing attention to myriad ongoing human rights abuses in Iran. In a recent video message, now viewed by millions around the world, he said, quote, "The tyrant of Tehran couches his warmongering in Iranian nationalism, but he does not speak for our nation. There is a vast coalition of patriotic Iranians at home and abroad, ready to step in and serve our nation and make peace in our region. I will step forward at their call to oversee this peaceful transition to democracy and see Iran's return to the community of nations." Reza Pahlavi's devotion to his countrymen extends to those in his adopted country, the United States, as he serves as a representative of the Iranian people to Americans across our country. It is a pleasure and an honor to confer the Richard Nixon Foundation's Architect of Peace Award to Reza Pahlavi. Congratulations, sir.
Pictures, right? Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our time together this evening, and I want to thank you all for your support. I hope that you leave tonight as inspired as I have been. Thank you for joining us this evening, and enjoy the special exhibition, The Ancient Worlds, which if you haven't seen, I strongly would encourage you to go see it. Thank you again, and good night.
We are here with Jim Byron, the CEO of Nixon Presidential Foundation. It is such a wonderful pleasure to have you here tonight. What an amazing event and ceremony. Tell us about the significance of this award.
Well, thank you very much, and you're right. It was an absolutely fantastic evening honoring His Imperial Highness, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. The award that was given tonight is the Architect of Peace Award, which was established by the Richard Nixon Foundation in 1995, a year after President Nixon passed. And it's given with the intention of promoting the values that he stood for and advocated for his entire life. His epitaph said, the greatest honor history can bestow is the title of peacemaker. And so what the foundation does is seeks out notable peacemakers that advance that mission. And in this case, we found a fitting recipient in His Imperial Highness.
The Architect of Peace Award has recently, or just in the past, been given to presidents, such as President George Bush and George Herbert Walker Bush, and some other presidents and senators. So tell us, what are the contributing factors of determining who should be the recipient of such an award?
Well, you know, it really has to do with who embodies President Nixon's lifelong goal of creating a generation of peace. And in this case, with His Imperial Highness, I think, as he said in his remarks a few minutes ago, this really is not only an award for him, but to the Iranian people, because they are fighting for peace. They are advocating for peace under an oppressive and tyrannical regime. And if he can accept this award to bring some coverage and some interest in what they are doing in Iran and throughout the country of Iran, then I think that in that case it's almost a double awardee in both the Crown Prince and his efforts and the Iranian people in their efforts.
In a couple of weeks, Empress Farah Pahlavi will also be receiving the same actual Architect of Peace Award. Tell us about that, and that's going to be held in Washington, D.C.
We're very honored that Her Imperial Majesty will receive this award as well, and for the same contributions as her son, the Crown Prince. There is arguably no more well-known a figure on the national stage for what Iran was, and a progressive secular society under Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, and the fact that the Empress is still with us and travels around the world as she does, and as frequently and as far-reaching as she does, is really quite something. So for us to be able to acknowledge those contributions and to bring some attention to that special relationship. Look, she knew the Nixons. I mean, as Crown Prince said tonight, they were very close as a family. And so for us to be able to bring attention to that special relationship by giving her this award and remembering what Iran was is something very worthy for us to do.
Absolutely. And President Nixon had actually mentioned, and this has been in one of his interviews, that he had a very special relationship with the Shah of Iran, with the late Shah of Iran, and that he knew him very well as a very sensitive man. And tonight we see these wonderful artifacts and photos. Tell us about these.
Yeah, we have so many wonderful things in our items in our collection that highlight the relationship between Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi and President Nixon and their families. And I will tell you that anytime we put out any of these photos or videos across the Richard Nixon Foundation's social media channels, they go berserk. The Iranian community in Iran and the Iranian American community, I think, are really longing for opportunities to remember what Iran was and the stability that it brought to the region in the Middle East in the 1970s particularly. And so when we put out those photos, we see just a tremendous response.
Yes, absolutely. Now, we're also very, very excited to go to Washington, D.C. and cover your other fabulous ceremony for Ms. Farah Pahlavi. And now, I also want to ask you, so when somebody receives such a prestigious award, it also actually strengthens their responsibility towards peace. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think, as the Crown Prince said tonight, that this is something that if he can bring attention to what the Iranian people are doing as they strive for peace, then that's very much in keeping with the basic tenets of why this award is given, and we couldn't think of a more worthy recipient.
And there are not that many people who have received such an award. Give us some of the names.
Sure. We have 3 presidents that have received the award, all here in person at the Nixon Library. President George W. Bush just received it actually about 6 months ago in this very room. We were very honored to have him as well. Several secretaries of state, including Henry Kissinger, who received the award twice. He's our only double recipient. And George Shultz and Mike Pompeo. Former National Security Advisor, Ambassador Robert O'Brien, who incidentally chairs the board of the Richard Nixon Foundation, was a recipient. And then other very special friends that contributed diplomatically to the United States, such as Walter and Leonore Annenberg. It's a very distinguished list, and we just couldn't be more pleased to add His Imperial Highness this evening.
Anything you'd like to add for the upcoming ceremony in Washington, D.C.?
Well, we want to invite the public to go to nixonfoundation.org if you're interested, and you can join us by purchasing tickets there.
We thank you ever so much. This has been an incredible ceremony. We appreciate everything that you have done tonight. Thank you. Thanks. در کنار آقای نیکان خطیبی هستیم، یکی از اشخاص کلیدی برای این سرمونی فوق‌العاده امیزینگ که امشب بود. Mr. Khatibi, it was a fabulous ceremony. Tell us about this wonderful honor that we have here to be here for this Peace Award.
Well, you're incredibly kind, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here today because President Nixon, as you know, has a great relationship with the former Shah of Iran. And that relationship has echoed for decades and decades and sustained the time of times. And so today we honored His Highness Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, in part because of all the work that he's doing to usher in democracy and peace throughout the Middle East. And it's important to highlight that. And one of the key things I would say from today, takeaways I would say from today, was the fact that he accepted this award on behalf of the Iranian people who have been suffering for almost 45 years now under this brutal Islamic regime. And so if today isn't a testament, it's a symbol of what can happen when good people get together on the American side, on the Iranian side, on the Iranian-American side, to bring together a voice and a discussion about bringing peace and prosperity to the Middle East.
What do you think are the contributing factors of determining who is going to be the recipient of such an award?
Sure. Obviously, it's going to be anybody who's been vocal about obviously ushering in peace throughout parts of the different world, number one. Two, somebody who's been accepted by the people in terms of the campaign and advocacy that he or she is doing. And number three, has credibility. So in the case with the Crown Prince of Iran, really, he has spent the last 45 years advocating for peace in the Middle East, being a symbol for change, being a voice for the people who have no voices. And so it was a no-brainer for President Nixon's team to really pick the former Shah, to pick the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, in part because similar to Nixon, similar to Kissinger, who've also been recipients, he embodies that notion of peace, hopefully in the Middle East.
تعداد اشخاصی که یک چنین اواردی رو تا حالا ریسیو کردند بهشون اهدا شده خیلی خیلی کم بوده، پرزیدنت های سابق بوده. شما فکر میکنید که مسئولیت رو تا چه اندازه بیشتر میکنه برای کراون پرنس رضا پهلوی؟
Well, listen, the more exposure you get as a leader, the better it is. In this particular case, he's made it very clear. I'm just a symbol and a voice for the Iranian people who have been suppressed under this horrible Islamic regime. And so today's award was incredibly important because it highlights, again, what the Iranian regime has been put these Iranian people through. Over the last 45 years, this regime has exported an ideology of anger and terrorism, and it's exported the resources of the Iranian people. And so by accepting this award tonight, he has made it very clear the Iranian people will no longer tolerate this anymore. It's time for change, and real change is happening. We are moving from hope to belief now. And today was a stand for that.
Absolutely. President Nixon Library and Museum actually has wonderful artifacts tonight that we watched of the relationship between President Nixon and the late Shah. How do you feel about that?
I loved it. If you get a chance, come on to the Nixon Library, check out the exhibit. It's incredible. You're going to love it. The entire team and crew here at the Nixon Library are just wonderful people. You can't miss this exhibit. It's here for a couple months. Call the Nixon Library, get your tickets, come on by. You're going to love it.
Yes.
Okay?
And also in a couple of weeks, Empress Farah Pahlavi is also going to be receiving this wonderful award. So tell us about that. And that's going to be held in Washington, D.C.
That'll be held in Washington, D.C. on November 7th. Again,
Architect of Peace Award.
Architect of the Peace Award. Grateful to the entire Nixon Foundation, the Nixon Library, who are recognizing such stewards in the community. And so if you're in D.C., please call the Nixon Library. Get your tickets. We'd love to see you in D.C.
So how emotional were you tonight?
Oh, my God, I had goosebumps. Really was, because even the Crown Prince himself had some goosebumps. You could see him shedding a tear or two as he was accepting this award for the Iranian people.
And the videos that we watched of late back then, it was just, I was very...
No, wasn't it
very
nostalgic?
Absolutely.
And I wasn't even around during that time, but I will tell you, for me being in Iran, in America, it was definitely nostalgic for me to see what Iran was and what it could have been had there not been some regime change. I will tell you that. It should have been the Japan of the Middle East. Instead, it's become the North Korea of the Middle East. Isolated, devalued currency, people living in fear. So hopefully change is coming very soon.
Hopefully. Thank you so much, Mr. Khatibi. Merci.